Hi, madam. I'm Samantha, which from Group 1. We're going to talk about presentations related to anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism financing, and process of unlawful activities. Here is my group members. We have Samantha, which is me, and then we have Sibyl, we have Aini, we have Laila, Mei Mei, and Afiq, and also Kyrie. Today I'm going to talk about the money laundering. So, what is money laundering? It is a way to make illegal money look like it was earned legally. It involves complicated transactions and activity to hide the source of the money. So, it can be looked without raising suspicious. Money laundering is illegal and can cause serious consequences for those involved. So, there's three type of uh, stages for money laundering. So first of all is placement, second is layering, and third is integrations. Okay, so the first one is placement stage. The illegal fund introduced into the financial system, often through cash deposit or wire transfer. In the other stage, which is the layering stage, the funds are moved through a series of transactions to conceal their origin and make it more difficult for authorities to track them. Finally, which is the integration stage, the funds are reintroduced into money economy in a way that make them appear legitimate. The next one is financial terrorism financialism. Terrorism financing, which is one of the money laundering as well. It is a process of providing financial support to terrorist organizations on individual to carry out the terrorist activity. The funds can be used to purchase weapons, recruit and train new members, and plan and execute attack. There are few methods of terrorist organizations. First of all, charitable donation. The terrorist organization offer you charitable donation as a way to raise fund. They can set up front of the organization or charity to solicit the donation from individual and businesses. The second one is criminal activity. Some terrorist organizations engage in criminal activity such as drug or the human trafficking or smuggling or finance their operations. Third one is the sponsorship. Some country provide financial support to terrorist organization as a way to advance their own political agents. Does. And the next one, which is money laundering. Terrorist organization may use money laundering to technique to hide their source of funds and make it difficult for the authority to trace it. The lastly, which is extortions. Terrorist organization may use extortions to obtain funds from business or individual. They may threaten violence or damage to property, and if the demands are not met. All right. The next part, which is process of the money laundering, there are a few steps. I'm going to talk about the first one, which is structuring. This involves breaking up large amounts of cash into smaller, more manageable amounts to avoid detections by law enforcement agency. The next one is smurfing. It's a form of structuring where multiple individuals, known as smurf, make small deposits into a bank account to avoid suspicious. Thirdly, which is the trade-based laundering, this involves the use of international trade transaction into the illicit funds across border. For example, a criminal might purchase goods or services from a legitimate business and pay with dirty money. Lastly, real estate. Criminal might use real estate transactions to launder money for purchasing property with illicit funds and then selling the property later at a higher price. So for the next one, I would like to pass to Alif to talk about more details.
Hi, I'm Amnan Amlatfa. Next, I will elaborate more regarding the type of process or methods that we mentioned by Samantha just now. First and foremost, it is regarding the structuring and smurfing in money laundering. You guys should know how to differentiate between them. So, structuring in money laundering is when perpetrators make transactions that are in varying sums below the trigger amount. This allows them to make continuous and regular deposit without triggering the automated cash reporting system. These kinds of transactions can be really hard to notice as they don't have any obvious pattern and do not trigger automated reporting system. Let's take an example on the slide. For example, an individual has $100,000 to deposit in their bank. So he or she would simply make multiple transactions where he or she deposited from January to March with separate three varying amount of transaction which all below $100,000 to avoid the triggering or threshold amount in avoiding any suspicious action to be caught. While smurfing in money laundering is when large quantities of money are broken into smaller transactions and done through multiple accounts. Those who make these deposits are referred to as smurf. Most often, cash that is obtained from illicit means or is intended to be used illegally is distributed this way. Often, the accounts through which such transactions are done belong to various people or simply people with multiple fake identities. If the same individual wanted to distribute a large amount, for example on the slide $1 million, so they will have to involve Smurf. As we can see, it involves Smurf A, Smurf B, Smurf C, and Smurf D. These people will make small deposits from various places around the state and the country. They may also make payments to different accounts belonging to one individual or multiple individuals in that person network. Next is trade-based money laundering. Trade-based money laundering is the process of disguising the proceeds of crimes and moving value through the use of trade transactions in an attempt to wash, launder, or legitimize their illicit funds. For example, on the slide, the sender is transferring value to the receiver and creating a paper trail that makes the proceeds of that transfer look legitimate. In the case of natural resources, this might be done by misinvoicing the value, but it is commonly done by misinvoicing the product itself, such as invoicing a shipment of rosewood as another type of wood. Then, legitimacy is gained by having official looking documentations or safe passage is secured by avoiding inspections of which is acquired through corruption. Last but not least is money laundering through real estate. This type of money laundering usually involves the real estate transaction that integrates the illicit funds into legal economy while providing a safe investment. One way criminals launder the team money through real estate is by hiding behind anonymous shell companies. They use those companies to hide their identities during the purchase and then benefit from the resale or retail income of those acquisitions. So, aside from these four types of money laundering, what are the other types of money laundering? There are other types of money laundering methods that are popular nowadays, which include bulk cash smuggling, money laundering through cryptocurrency and foreign exchange, and also among the famous one, especially during this high-tech era, is cyber money laundering, where the use of proxy servers and anonymizing software that further the money laundering activities. As one of the largest economy in Southeast Asia, with high investment in technology and digital sectors, Malaysia's financial regulators have to adapt in order to safeguard their financial system against emerging anti-money laundering, combating financial terrorism threats, and comply with AMLA Malaysia. These are several key considerations in order to prevent money laundering in Malaysia. First, Bank Negara Malaysia as the competent financial authority to oversee Malaysia financial system. Second, by having AMLA Malaysia legislation. Third, by having data protection legislation that relates to money laundering in Malaysia by referring to the Personal Data Protection Act 2010 PDPA. Fourth, imposing the Transactions Monitoring and Money Laundering Malaysia by AMLA Malaysia. Fifth, under the AMLA Malaysia also, section screening is an important priority for banks and financial institutions, which they must report any sections alerts to BNM as well any anti-money laundering onboarding and monitoring such as requires banks and financial institutions to conduct ongoing customer due diligence CDD. And last but not least, upcoming AMLA Malaysia regulatory changes to help fintechs with Malaysia's wider anti-money laundering combating financial terrorism regime over the coming years. Next, I would like to talk about Bank Negara Malaysia BNM as a competent financial authority and how its function can actually prevent and monitoring money laundering in Malaysia. The Malaysian financial system is overseen by Bank Negara Malaysia BNM, which acts as the country's regulator and central bank. BNM sets anti-money laundering combating financing terrorism policy in Malaysia that adopting a risk-based supervisory approach and issuing predict guidance to Malaysian financial institutions in line with the recommendation of the Asia Pacific Group on Money Laundering APG. For your information, Malaysia has become members of APG since May 2000. BNM actually plays important function in Malaysia anti-money laundering, combating financing terrorism regime covering areas such as financial intelligence, investigations and enforcement of laws under the purview of BNMs as well as supervisions of reporting institutions. BNM is joined its supervisions of Malaysia financial system by the Securities Commissions SC, which acts as the regulatory authority for the capital market, and also with Labuan Financial Service Authority Labuan FSA. BNM has revived the existing anti-money laundering, combating financing terrorism regime by introducing two policy documents that come into effect on 1st January 2020. The policy documents is FI policy documents, institutions policy documents, and also MBFI DNFBP policy document, which is non-banking financial institutions and designated non-financing business and professions policy document. So, what is AMLA? AMLA refers to the Anti-Money Laundering, Anti-Terrorism Financing and Proceeds of Unlawful Activities Act 2001. AMLA referring to Act 613 is the primary piece of anti-money laundering combating financing terrorism legislation in Malaysia that actually was gazetted on 5th July 2001 and come into force on 15 January 2002. AMLA, which imposed reporting obligations as a countermeasure to prevent or mitigate money laundering or terrorism financing, was enacted with the intention to fulfill the international standards imposed by the Financial Action Task Force FATF. The first schedule of AMLA defined a reporting institution as any person, including branches or subsidiaries of that person who carries on any activity listed in the first schedule. Second schedule of AMLA defined a serious offences as any of the offences specified in the second schedule and attempt to commit any of those offences or the abatement of any those offences. So, under subsection 4, subsection 1, offences of money laundering, and subsection 4A, offences of structuring transactions to evade reporting requirement. So, money laundering referred as a serious offences that actually included in UMBLA Act 2001. So, for the purpose of our study, I would like to focus on the paragraph 4, subsection 1 of the UMBLA 2001 that specified the offences of money laundering. It stated that a person commits money laundering when the person first engage directly or indirectly in the transactions that involve proceeds of unlawful activity. Second, acquires, receive, possess, transfer, and use the proceeds of an unlawful activity. Third, remove from or brings into Malaysia proceeds of an unlawful activity, or conceal, discuss the establishments of the true nature, origin, location, movement, title, right with respect to all the ownerships of the proceeds of an unlawful activity. Based on this section also, it stated that those person commits money laundering will be liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 15 years and should also be liable to a fine of not less than 5 times of the sum or the value of the proceeds of unlawful activity, or 5 million ringgit, whichever is higher. Do you remember that I mentioned on the previous slide that one of the functions of BNM is to supervise reporting institutions? So, what is reporting institution? Reporting institutions are all the entities that required by law to undertake preventive measures to prevent their institutions from being used as a conduct for money laundering or terrorism financing activities. So, based on AMLA 2001, it also specified what are the entities that included in the reporting institutions. It included lawyers, accountants, company secretaries, those companies that engage with the business casino and gambling business, trust companies, and many more. This can be referred to BNM official website and UMBLA Act 2001.
Hi, this is Sybil, and I will talk about the Financial Action Task Force. So, in order to combat money laundering crimes, an intergovernmental organization known as the FATF is set in place. The Financial Action Task Force prevents money laundering by setting standards in place as well as making international policies. They also continuously strengthen their global standards to address new risks. For example, cryptocurrencies have become really popular in recent years. Its popularity has also brought certain risks that are regulated by the Financial Action Task Force under their regulations for virtual assets. Currently, FATF recognizes 37 countries as full members. So, what is the objective of the FATF? Their main objective is to combat money laundering through creating standards and global policies to ensure a coordinated global response to prevent organized crime, corruption, and terrorism. They help authorities go after the money of criminals dealing in illegal drugs, human trafficking, and other crimes. Plus, they also work to stop funding for weapons of mass destruction. Another objective of the FATF is monitoring methods and trends used by money laundering criminals. So, the Financial Action Task Force continuously monitors how criminals and terrorists raise, use, and move funds. As countries put in place effective measures to disrupt illicit financial flows, criminals must find alternative ways to launder their dirty money. So, that is why the FATF regularly publishes reports that raise awareness about the latest money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing techniques so that the countries and private sector can take the necessary steps to mitigate the risks. FATF also assesses implementation. So the FATF monitors countries to ensure they implement the FATF standards fully and effectively. In total, more than 200 countries and jurisdictions have committed to implement the FATF standards, and they're assessed with the help of 9 FATF associate member organizations and other global partners such as the World Bank. Now, finally, FATF identifies high risk jurisdictions. So it holds countries to account that do not comply with the FATF standards. If a country repeatedly fails to implement the FATF standards, then it can be named as a jurisdiction under increased monitoring or a high risk jurisdiction. Now, to combat financing of terrorism, FATF has agreed a number of recommendations, like you can see on the slide. So, these recommendations set out the basic framework to detect, prevent, and suppress the financing of terrorism and terrorist acts. Let's look into them in detail. Firstly is the ratification and implementation of UN instruments. Each country should take immediate steps to ratify and to implement fully the 1999 United Nations International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism. Countries should also immediately implement the United Nations resolution relating to the prevention and suppression of the financing of terrorist acts, particularly United Nations Security Council Resolution 1373. Secondly, is criminalizing the financing of terrorism and associated money laundering. Each country should criminalize the financing of terrorism, terrorist acts, and terrorist organizations. Countries should ensure that such offenses are designated as money laundering predicate offenses. Next is freezing and confiscating terrorist assets. The FATF recommends that each country should implement measures to freeze without delay funds or other assets of terrorists, those who finance terrorism and terrorist organizations in accordance with the United Nations resolutions relating to the prevention and suppression of the financing of terrorist acts. Each country should also adopt and implement measures, including legislative ones, which would enable the competent authorities to seize and confiscate property that is the proceeds or the financing of terrorism, terrorist acts, or terrorist organizations. Finally, is reporting suspicious transactions related to terrorism. If financial institutions or other businesses or entities subject to anti money laundering obligations suspect or have reasonable grounds to suspect that funds are linked or related to um, terrorism, terrorist acts, or terrorist organizations, they should be required to report promptly their suspicions to the competent authorities. Next is international cooperation. The FATF recommends that each country should afford another country, on the basis of a treaty, arrangement, or other mechanism, for mutual legal assistance or information exchange, the greatest possible measure of assistance in connection with criminal, civil enforcement, and administrative investigations, inquiries, and proceedings relating to the financing of terrorism or terrorist acts. Countries should also take all possible measures to ensure that they do not provide safe havens for individuals charged with the financing of terrorism, terrorist acts, or money laundering, and should have procedures in place to expel, where possible, such individuals. Next is alternative remittance. So each country should take measures to ensure that persons or legal entities, including agents that provide a service for the transmission of money, including transmission through an informal money transfer system, should be licensed or registered and subject to all the FATF recommendations that apply to banks and non-bank financial institutions. Each country should ensure that persons or legal entities that carry out the service illegally are subject to administrative, civil, or criminal sanctions. Next is wire transfers. So, the FATF recommends that countries should take measures to require financial institutions, including money remitters, to include accurate and meaningful originator information, which includes name, address, and account number, on fund transfers and related messages that are sent. And the information should remain with the transfer or related message through the payment chain. Countries should also take measures to ensure that financial institutions, including money remitters, conduct enhanced scrutiny and monitor for suspicious activity funds transfers, which do not contain complete originator information. Finally, is non-profit organizations. So countries should review the adequacy of laws and regulations that relate to entities that can be abused for the financing of terrorism. Nonprofit organizations are particularly vulnerable, and countries should ensure that they cannot be misused by terrorist organizations that are posing as legitimate entities. That's all from me. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maymay. I am now going to share about the impacts of Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Act, aka Amlatfa, enhances the integrity and stability of financial sectors. This means that the honest and moral principles of one's being and the financial sectors are carefully being controlled and maintained to keep the quality of the security at a high protection ground. Next, it helps countries become integrated into the global financial system. Since foreign investments and international cash flows affects the economic growth of each country, Amlatfa helps to prevent such distortions during the process of the investments, etc. As Amlatfa acts like an aid for prosecuting and deterring corruption and tax evasion, it also provides wide-ranging investigation powers for law enforcement authorities, allowing the law authorities to charge necessary properties and other possessions obtained from committing the serious crimes. This way, this controls the adverse effects of criminal economic activity as it causes pressure and allow the suspects to understand the consequences that awaits them in the long run. This somehow achieved to maintain the economic growth at an ideal pace. Obligations. The responsibilities of Amlatfa when it comes to money laundering are the 3 points. First, prevention. There are certain measures that are taken to prevent money laundering in terms of keeping the updated legislations. As of now, especially how we have data and everything is done via technology. Of course, the money laundering can be done through connections of a simple technology. So there are ways to counter these acts of crimes. Next is detection, like monitoring, as this can reflect the level of risk the institute can face, especially in most common targets are the banks and the financial sectors. Lastly, reporting. The access of the risk with reasonable examination and clarification of the economic background and the purpose of any transaction. It is to be expected to face off the money laundering and financing terrorism in the course of its business. With prevention of money laundering and terrorism, the influence to the economic development would result more positive for the outcome of the future economy. This correlates with the foreign investments and local investments as well with the prevention. There are no risk for the investments to pour when the rate of the laundering crime is low. Disadvantages of money laundering and terrorism damages financial sector institutions critical for economic growth. With the sectors being laundered with money, they are not be able to provide big contributions for the country's economic growth. With the money laundering, it's promoting crime and corruption that slows down the economic growth, especially if the suspects are not prosecuted well for the crimes they have committed. Then it may lead to influencing the society and increase the rate of the money laundering, defeating the purpose of Amlatfa. Thank you.
International cooperation is the coordination between countries or corporations. Malaysia participates in various regional and international initiatives in its global fight against money laundering and terrorism financing. The following is a list of organizations in which Malaysia participates as a member. Firstly, Financial Action Task Force (FATF). FATF is an intergovernmental body established in 1989 to set standards and promote effective implementation of legal, regulatory, and operational measures for combating money laundering and terrorism financing, and the other related threats to the integrity of the international financial system. Malaysia is subjected to periodic assessment or mutual evaluation on compliance with the FATF standards. Malaysia was evaluated three times, firstly in 2001, then in 2007, and the last one in 2014. To strengthen its framework, it must take a few steps, including re-evaluating the risk assessment of terrorist financing and threats from foreign sources. Malaysia needs to focus on obtaining convictions and confiscation and better use of financial intelligence. Second, Asia Pacific Group on Money Laundering (APG). APG was formed in 1997 in Bangkok, Thailand, and Malaysia has been a member of the APG since 31st May 2000. As a FATF-style regional body, the APG's terms of reference recognize that the FATF standards are the international standards and include a commitment that APG members must implement the standards within their constitutional framework. The APG's membership currently stands at 41 active member jurisdictions, making it the largest FSRB in the world. In addition, 11 members of the APG are also members of the FTF, namely Australia, Canada, India, the People's Republic of China, Hong Kong, China, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, New Zealand, Singapore, and the United States of America. Next is Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units. Egmont Group is a united body of 166 financial intelligence units. The Egmont Group provides a platform for the secure exchange of expertise and financial intelligence on money laundering and terrorism financing. This is especially relevant as financial intelligence units are uniquely positioned to cooperate and support national and international efforts to counter terrorist financing and are the trusted gateway for sharing financial information domestically and internationally in accordance with global standards. Malaysia was admitted as a member of the Egmont Group in July 2003. Malaysia was also elected as the Asia and Pacific Region Chair in the Egmont Committee for two terms, which are 2006 to 2008 and 2008 to 2010. The last one is Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN). Malaysia is a founding member of ASEAN, which was established in August 1967. One of the fundamental principles of ASEAN is to strengthen the foundations for a prosperous and peaceful community of Southeast Asian nations. Example, the Senior Official Meeting on Transnational Crime covers 8 areas of transnational crime.
So in the NCC, in the community itself, it is divided into two levels of coordination, which is the working level and the higher level. It's the same as the workflow of a company, which is the higher level with new procedures or new ideas to make sure that the flow of the company is doing well. So in the NCC itself, the higher level formulates national policies and initiatives and plays the advisory role and sets out the strategic direction for the NCC. It comprises the head of deputies of the member ministries and agencies such as the Ministry of Finance. So for the working level, they are the one that is going to follow the rules that is being set up by the high levels and make sure that they are doing as effective as possible. So under the NCC, this group examines and subsequently address operational issues relating to the implementation and effectiveness of initiatives approved by the NCC high levels. Next will be the National Risk Assessment or the NRA. Basically, this DNRA is a report or basically an overview on how the country is managing the risk or controlling risk for coming in and out of the country itself. So the real definition would be the assessment of the country's exposure to prevailing crimes, doesn't matter if it's domestic or foreign, and vulnerabilities of various sectors to money laundering and terrorism financing risk. It comprises of both threat and sectorial assessment covering financial and DNFBB sectors. But most importantly, it consists of various quantitative and qualitative sources such as statistics and reports from various public and private entities, or even surveys conducted among law enforcement agencies, reporting institutions, and other credible external reports. So by having the NRA in our country, we are being able to know how are we performing in managing risk from coming in and out of the country, or are the procedures that we are using right now perfect for our country, or is it making it more worse for us to manage or control risk. Even if it's not the right procedure, it is still a benefit for us because we know what are we going to do or what any other ways for us to apply to make sure that our country is in a safer protection. So by having this NRA, we are being able to apply appropriate national AMF or CFT strategy and policy response proportionate to the identified risk. Also, by having this NRA, we are able to make risk-informed decision, focusing on real and identified threats. But most importantly, by having this NRA, we are able to prioritize resources towards areas that gives a higher impact in our country. So to provide proof that our international and domestic cooperation is stable, these are the certain issues that have been found and also been solved by the nation itself, which is during COVID-19, there are certain scams under special aid and also overpriced face masks, which is counterfeiting medical goods. So to make sure that it is to give proof that it is stable, the higher level, which is the government itself, sets laws for those who engage in money laundering or any certain crime that is related, which is under Section 4. Any person that are engaging in or attempts to engage in are liable to a fine or even imprisonment. So we could see that the higher levels are setting rules or regulations or even procedures for us to follow. So for the working levels, they are given the opportunity to make sure that the procedures are being done in an effective way. So this is why we can see such as the police itself or the person who are liable for finding the private hospital. They are the ones that are given the authority or given the power to execute or to make sure that the procedures or guidelines are being done well. So to conclude about these certain issues or the cooperation itself, doesn't matter if it's domestic or international, our country is stable. It can be better in the future, but for right now, all I can say is that our country has a community that is suitable or is reliable for our citizens to know that we are in a secure country.
So, for the current issue, I've taken an article from Bernama on March 23rd, 2023 with the headline Rosmah Money Laundering Tax Evasion Case Heard Before New Judge. Rosmah faces 12 money laundering charges involving RM 7 million ringgit and 5 counts of failing to declare her income to the Inland Revenue Board (LHDN). The wife of former Prime Minister Najib Razak was accused of committing the offences at Affin Bank, Bangunan Getah Asli and also LHDN Complex Bangunan Kerajaan between May 1st, 2014 and May 1st, 2018. For the 12 money laundering charges will be fall under Section 4A, Subsection 1 of the AMLA 2001, while the failing to declare the income will be fall under Section 114, Subsection 1A of the Income Tax Act 1967 of the willful inventions of tax. For your information, FATF also declare and define that the willful inventions of tax is one type of money laundering. For the summary and conclusion, I would like to remind to you guys for all the future accountants and auditors to really learn and get know about AMLA Act 2001 and what's the functions of our financial authority have done to prevent and monitor money laundering and terrorism financing in Malaysia. The introductions of anti-money laundering, combating financing terrorism will actually measure to deter the criminals from using our future professional as accountant and help us to detect them if they do. An accountant may detect the red flags during the course of providing professional service that might not be picked up by other financial institutions or other financial service provider who interact with the same customer of the businesses. With that, that's all from us. Thank you.